Yo, what's going on? In today's bonus episode, we've got Rory Linkletter, professional marathoner for Puma, back on the show. We go over his recent race in New York, but we also go back a bit, talk about his Olympics, his coaching change, and also where he ranks among the world's fastest marathoning YouTubers. Hey, Rory, how's it going? Looks like you're back in Flagstaff. How are you feeling today?
I am feeling pretty good. I'm in day 3 of my no run break
Okay.
and just trying to hang on for dear life and make it one day at a time.
Okay. All right. How many more days before you start, at least starting to get moving a little bit more in a structured way?
Yeah, I actually don't know the answer to that. I want to see how long I can do it because it's kind of one of
Okay.
those things where I always get the itch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely the goal. The minimum goal is 1 week completely off, and then I
Okay.
think I'll probably introduce some sporadic running to get me back on the horse.
Okay. Okay. It's been a while since I had you on the shows, and since then, a lot has happened and a lot has changed for you. So I want to go back to kind of the last big race that I haven't talked to you about yet, and I want to talk about the Olympics a little bit. It seems like a forever ago, but it really wasn't that long.
Yeah, it does feel like a long time ago to me as well. This year's been long, but full of a lot of cool stuff, and really, just an awesome year altogether.
And I saw that you got some ink to commemorate the achievement of being an Olympian over there.
There it
Nice.
is.
It looks good. It looks good on you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty
Congratulations.
stoked. Pretty stoked about it. I'm a tattoo guy myself, and when I was like, man, I really want to get the rings, and I got to earn it. And that I told myself a year or two ago, because I get a tattoo probably on average every 6 months at this point in my life.
Okay.
I said you don't get another one until you make the Olympics. So
Okay.
if I didn't make this one, I was going to go four plus years without it. So I'm glad I
Okay.
earned
Okay.
it.
All right. Well, that would have been good motivation too, though.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But you made it this time, and you ran a 2:13 on an incredibly difficult course on some really tough conditions that day. You came in 47th overall. And if I recall correctly, I thought it was a great performance for you, but like your reaction to that, it seemed a little bit disappointed. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I'm closer to the higher levels of this sport than that. I think, you know, it's hard to not compare yourself to your peers and to people that you want to be close to. And quite frankly, I was like, man, I just wasn't competing with as many of the people I thought I could compete with on that day. And as far as like execution of a marathon went, it was more of a survival marathon than like a master class in marathoning. So there was just like the race day execution on top of the fact that I wasn't around as many of the people that I hoped to be around and compete with in that race. Those two things stacked together made me evaluate it as a subpar day for sure.
Okay. I think one of the things that you had mentioned is that like you felt like you had worked hard to prepare, but you hadn't prepared for the right kind of race. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I expected just this, like, I don't know, marathon unlike any other with the course profile. I was thinking this was going to be a battle of, being able to survive and not like have the course affect you and, keep your legs on straight more or less and your head on straight more or less. And it was just not like that. It was just kind of fast, and the hills were just, kind of like obstacles, not these things that were stopping people in their tracks like I assumed it would.
And then shortly after that, I think you announced a coaching change, not related or caused by the Olympic performance, but that you had a change. How are you addressing some of those feelings that you had after the Olympics through the new coaching change?
Yeah, so right after the Olympics, Ryan, my coach that had guided me to the Olympics and the previous 2 years prior, just decided he was done coaching athletes in general. He just wanted to spend more time doing other things. He was just ready to move on. So I was kind of put in a weird position because I had known immediately that I was going to start getting ready for New York. And so I was like, okay, I've got 12 weeks till my next marathon. I just finished one that I was disappointed in, and now I've got to navigate getting ready for my next race without knowing my future as far as training situation goes. And I started talking to a lot of people and reached out to, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen different people. But one of my priorities was to find some help in the interim here in Flagstaff. And John Green was the first person that came to my mind, and we had a great initial meeting. We kind of hit it off. I agreed to let him guide me through New York and see how things went, and they went really well, honestly. It was a really, really fun marathon block. I felt like I was really, really fit. Things were working. Body was in a great place, and I think I was able to show that for the most part in New York City this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following the progress through the videos you've been putting out on YouTube. Really been enjoying that. And it seems like you were really enjoying some of the experiments that you got to do, stuff that you weren't doing with some previous coaches, like the double threshold. How was that for you? In the moment, what were you thinking about those changes? Because sometimes changes can be disorienting. And then now, having experienced the race in New York, how do you think that was for you?
For me, change is exciting. I wasn't really necessarily looking for that big of a change because of the fact that, me and Ryan were doing really well together over the past 2 years. I kind of thought that he would be my coach for the rest of my career. But when I was given a position of like, oh, now something new's coming, I was at first stressed, but once I felt like I had my feet underneath me and a solid foundation, I did start to get excited about the new things and the trials that we were going to have with trying a new different system and approach. And the double threshold specifically was the biggest shift in focus, something I hadn't done, something that, is pretty popular in the training world, but we did it in a very fun and I think marathon specific way. And I gained a lot of confidence through those sessions. And I think it translated really well in my training and in the race day, my ability to run some really fast splits at New York. I mean, the overall time was solid, but like if you just look at the way New York is ran, I had to run so many different paces out there at different moments that I was really pleased with my body's ability to handle, the spikes in lactate and stuff.
And in the training, you had mentioned in one of your videos that you had been doing like a string of 120-mile weeks, really high mileage for you. And you think like doing the double thresholds instead of other, like, I guess, equivalently large training sessions, do you think that helps you get there?
Yeah, what I think the double threshold allowed me to do was those days, even though they're large in volume, I think most of the time I was running over 20 miles on the day and right around 13 to 15 miles of threshold volume is like surprisingly, just because it's broken up into intervals and you're doing it in two separate sessions, you come off of it not feeling quite as worn down as if you had the exact same number of miles ran at pace in one session. So I was able to, go from double threshold into something else, maybe more specific to the marathon, whether it be a long run with paces at marathon pace, or maybe we were hitting other stimulus like 5K, 10K speed just to work on that. And I was able to do those massive double threshold sessions and then come back and round out the week with something else that made a lot of sense without feeling like I was totally buried by it. So that allowed me to run pretty high volume without feeling like I was running pretty high volume.
All right. And when you're putting in all these big workouts, because I've seen some of the workouts that you're doing and they look gigantic. What shoes are you doing for some of these double threshold days?
Yeah, so I historically ran in the Fast R2 for my previous two marathons, the Seville Marathon and the Olympic Marathon. So I was using that still, but I was also rotating in the Deviate Elite 3 a lot more than I had in previous builds. In my Seville build, I hadn't gotten a pair of them until like 3 weeks before the race. So it was like I didn't want to throw them into the rotation so late. And then Seville went so well, I was kind of favoring the Fast R2 because I was coming off of it. So I did use them a little bit, the Deviate Elite 3s in the Paris build, but not as much. And then I kind of just slowly made it a 50-50 split between those two shoes in this build. And I just had a couple really, really good experiences in the Deviate Elite 3. And I'm like more of a curious person than anything when it comes to shoes. So I was like, I've done the Fast R2 experience. I've now trained in the Deviate Elite 3 here for the last 2 months, and I've felt really good in these sessions. Why don't I try this for a marathon? Because really, I don't think you can know how good a shoe is in a marathon until you get to mile 22 dead tired and see how your legs pop off the ground.
And I think the first marathon you did in them would have been Chicago, where you had some pacing duties. Is that right?
Correct. I guess that one does count because I did do the full marathon distance in Chicago with those shoes on, and I felt great that day.
Okay. Yeah. I have one question about, because this is the second time you've paced in Chicago, like second time in a row now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And this year, it looked to me, at least early on, that you were running with Annie Frisbee. Is that who you like went there to pace?
No, so I went there just told I was going to pace the same pace I did last year, which was like Molly had run like 2:23. So I knew I was going to run about 2:23 pace. And our group, there was two groups that Chicago had brought pacers in for. And basically through talking with the field, it sounded like those two groups were going to become one. And so we're going to have two pacers for one group. And so when the race started to get tough for some people, me and the other pacer had to kind of make a decision on like who's going to help these people and who's going to help those people. And Jackson Neff was the other pacer, and he kind of naturally found himself at the front helping Lindsay and Gabby Rooker. I had about 10 miles. There was a little bit of a separation back to Annie Frisbee and Sarah Vaughn, I want to say, was the other person. There might have been one other in that group, but yeah, we kind of just found ourselves in this like split. And then, so I was helping Annie for the next 6-7 miles or so. And then what happened was, since Chicago had so many pacers for women, the previous pace group, the one that went out in 72 minutes, caught us at like 25K, because I think Annie was starting to slow about 5-10 seconds a mile. And so once that she fell back to that group, I was like, well, like I was hired to pace the pace that's up there. So what I did is I stopped, I went to the bathroom because I really had to go. and then I sprinted and then I sprinted up to catch Gabby and Lindsay.
Okay. Yeah, because when I saw you, you were by yourself, and I'm like, he looks good, but what is he doing?
Yeah, so I basically handed Annie back to Matt Yano, who was pacing the 72-minute through halfway group. And I was like, okay, I know I feel good. Like, if I just run really hard for like a mile or two, I'll catch this group that had split off from us. And I was right. I caught them, I think, like maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles after I let Annie go. So, it was really good timing because I think Gabby had just started to fall off of Lindsay at that point. And so I kind of was Gabby's individual pacer for a minute. And then once Gabby started to do like kind of like this thing where it's like, I don't know how much I'm helping her pace anymore. She's more just surviving the race. I went up to Lindsay. And I think that's when you saw me, was when I was catching Lindsay at the end. And I ran Lindsay into the finish because Jackson, I think, stopped at around 40K.
Let's get to New York then after that. You recovered pretty well from the Chicago pacing and then back into training right away?
Yeah, I did. Funny enough, I paced Chicago on Sunday, flew back Sunday night, and was doing double threshold Tuesday morning, and then my last big session that Saturday. So I kind of hit 2 really big stimuluses that next week, and the one that was on the Saturday, 15 days out, is kind of like a classic for me, last minute big session, like the last big one, and it's like 15 miles at marathon effort, whatnot. And it went really well. And that's kind of like how I always like evaluate the last touch to the build, is like running a very long time at marathon effort. And so, I was able to come back and hit like those 2 sessions really well right after, and then kind of start like a very gradual taper into the race.
Okay. And you do that 2 weeks out? 15 miles at marathon effort, 2 weeks out?
15 days out, technically. So 2 weeks and a day.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big session. So let's get to race day. I did get to see you briefly in the morning. I was doing my kind of paparazzi thing figure out where the athlete
Yeah.
hotel was, and kind of scoped everybody out. You looked really relaxed. You looked like you were just as loose as can be. Is that what was going through your mind?
Yeah, it was pretty good the morning of. Funny enough, so this was my 10th marathon. I think, the second most nervous I'd ever been the day before. I don't know what it
Oh,
was.
okay.
Maybe I was in my head about how I was feeling or whatnot, but like I was having like GI distress, like because I was just like I just felt like it was like those nerves were just hitting me really hard for the day before. So I was actually kind of like in a little bit of a panic the day before because I was like, man, I just can't like settle myself. But then I woke up that morning and felt a lightness to me again. And I remember the bus ride super long over to the start line, and I felt really relaxed and chill and positive, and that kind of feeling carried all the way through the start of the race, and even throughout the race, I felt like I was in a really good headspace.
Okay. Now, and you mentioned that your wife was going to be at mile 8 because your wife was in town to watch the race. And that's where I was going to be. That was going to be my first stop. We did look for her, but we didn't see her there. But there's like a sea of people at mile 8. When you got to mile 8, did you see her?
So funny enough, she had planned to be at mile 8, and then the
Okay.
morning of, she was like, "I just don't want to. I don't want to miss the finish. I don't want to like be worried about this or that or the other." And she's like, "You might not even hear me. It might not be like." So she just decided to go to the finish line and watch with Connor Mance's wife and some other folks. Because it's a pretty good setup for New York at the finish line, and then she was right there for me at the finish line. So no, she didn't end up going to mile 8,
Okay.
so I didn't see her.
Okay. Because when we were there, we left right after the men came through, and it was tight. It was like we ran pretty hard to get to the finish line, and it's probably would have been just as difficult because her level of security to get to the finish line probably would have been as hard as we had grandstand tickets, but even then you're kind of like sneaking around through the different paths in Central Park to get through levels of security and stuff. So I feel like that's a pretty good call.
Yeah. I think that it would have been really sad if she had missed the finish line just to see me in a part of the race when, it's not that important. I'm probably feeling pretty comfortable normally at 8 miles in a marathon anyways. So yeah, it was a good call.
So where were the kids then?
So this was the first time we left the kids at home, and my mother-in-law came into town to house sit and kid watch, and it was a really fun weekend, but it was very different than my previous 2 marathons where they were there for it.
Yeah, because Seville they were there when you ran your fastest marathon, and then the Olympics they were there, right?
Correct. I didn't see them much before the Olympics, other
Sure.
than like a couple times before the race because I was in the village. But yeah, they were there.
Okay. Let's talk about the race itself a little bit more specifically. You've mentioned in your post that you felt like you were right in the mix until about the halfway point, or maybe right around Queensboro Bridge. And then I think the race started to break open a little bit. Let's talk about the first half. I saw you a lot on camera from the feed as we're watching it, as we're kind of like trying to navigate around New York. What's it like being up at the front, New York City Marathon, kind of like, the cameras are on you, the trucks are on you, and you're ahead of like 3 former champions of this race, like right on your heels. What's that feeling like?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, those moments are ones that I hope I can always appreciate and hope that I can get more of them in the future and have them stick a little bit more. Like my whole thing with this race was that I wanted to be in the action because I felt like I was totally out of the Paris Olympic marathon. Like I never felt like I was in that race, and that just was like that's not how I want to run anymore. That's not that doesn't excite me. So I just want to be in races where I feel like I can be in the race, and I'm willing to place a premium on that over maybe running a little bit more cautious or a little bit more conservative and maximizing like finishing place maybe. Yeah, I just want to be like, I want to be able to practice competing first and foremost. And I think New York's the perfect place to do it because of the course and the lack of pacers and just the nature of how it's run. So when I was in the lead, it was mostly because there was a lot of surging, and whenever it slowed, I just kind of was like, I might as well go to the front. If I'm going to be chill back here, I might as well be chill up there. And that way, when the next surge is made, what it helps is if you're in the front, when it's slow, when it goes fast again, because it will inevitably, you don't have to respond to it immediately. You can feel it coming up on your shoulder. They go ahead. You can kind of slide to the back of the group, and then by the time they're done surging, you haven't really changed your pace that much. You just moved your position within the group. So I kind of used that tactic to stay as relaxed as I could through those early miles. Like I was like, if it's going to be slow relative, then I'm going to be up at the front, and then if it's going to be fast, I'll like ride the train, just get on the back and try to hold on until the surges are over.
And then through those first, let's say it's like 16 miles, nutrition's going okay? You're picking up your bottles all right this time?
Yeah, I missed one bottle. It was the second bottle, and it was just because our group was huge, and I was one of the first tables, and I kind of don't like that because people get excited when the tables are coming, and so I had to be kind of like aggressive. And what had happened was I was starting to move in towards my bottle. Like I had to take a step in towards the table, and someone's hand brushed up against my back and kind of like vaulted me forward. I wouldn't say they pushed me, but they like definitely like gave me a ton of extra momentum because they like hip checked me, like mostly probably to protect their footing. But I missed that bottle entirely because of that. And luckily my half tights that I race in, I put 2 gels in. And so I just, I was mad when it happened, but I remained calm. And I know that, I have enough calories on course to afford some mishaps.
And then the shoes you were racing in, those were the Nitro Elite 3s for today?
Correct.
For that day? Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then, once the race starts kind of breaking open, what's going through your head there in terms of like, you're coming in with this mentality of, I want to take bigger risks to get those bigger rewards. Like, is there something that's in you that's saying like, hold on until you die? Or it's like, that's a bit too big of a risk? Like, how are you doing that calculus?
Yeah, so it was kind of a tough situation because I was gapped slightly going up Queensboro, so around 15 and a half miles, 25K. I probably had like 10 to 15 meters gap form, and that was a move. Like there was definitely like a concerted effort by, I think Evans Chipette was the one putting in the biggest move there at that point. I rewatched some of the footage and seen some clips, and it looks like everyone strung out right there, especially coming off Queensboro and getting onto First Ave. So when that move was made, I ran really well down the Queensboro Bridge and took that momentum. And I was like, it was really strung out in front of me, and I could see the bodies that were like, I could tell that carnage had just hit this whole field. Like we were running as a giant pack, and now it was like little groupings of 3 or 4 people spread out across the road. And this is a big road, First Ave, super wide. So I come around that corner, and right in front of me is CJ Albertson and Johnny Malore, British guy. And I kind of like throw in like a very like concerted, like I'm going to run hard and see if I can go get those guys. And I ran the fastest mile of my race from 16 to 17, and the second or third fastest mile of my race from 17 to 18. I caught them around 17, pulled them through 18. We caught Frank Lara shortly after 18, and then we kind of had this group of 4. And I kind of stayed at the front and was like still hammering, eyes up the road, obviously calculating my risk. I'm thinking like, there's Clayton right there. He's got to be a guy I've got to keep in my sight if I have any chance of beating him. So I'm pressing. We hit the Willis Ave Bridge around 20 miles, and literally as soon as I crested that bridge and we started going down into the Bronx, I was like, shoot. It just like
Okay.
I was like, I'm not able to press anymore. I'm more in like a cruise control, like damage control. My legs are starting to really fall apart on me, and I was like, okay, my best hope at that point was that I was able to tuck in and find second wind in a mile or two. Basically, I was just running on fumes all the way into the finish, and I got caught by 2 more people. I ended up catching one, but I didn't beat anyone that I was running with in the last in the last 6 miles from 20 to the finish. Everyone that was in front of me pretty much stayed in front of me, except for Wesley Kiptoo, who had gone really hard and cracked, and then 2 extra people caught me. So that was like, I would say, a really, really good 20 miles, and dang, I wish I had more of those last 6 was my experience. And I think that was the risk I was willing to take when I was pushing on First Ave.
And then you finished at 2:11:45. Fantastic time for New York, coming in 15th overall and first Canadian. Which of those are you most proud of?
The time in New York. I thought on my very, 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 very best day, I could break 2:10 on that course that day. And really, I was on around 2:10 pace till that last 6 when I started to go. So like, if I had been able to keep rolling the way I was pressing on First Ave, then I would have done like my A race. I was basically gunning for my A race up until 20, which I feel like historically for me, usually my A race is already out the window if it's not going to happen at 20. So the fact that there was still something on the table like that, I'm really proud of that. So I am proud of the 2:11:45 just because New York is a hard course, and I know like if I translate that into a fast course, that's my second best marathon I've ever run as far as time, because I think it would have been a sub 2:10 performance on a even moderately normal course. Like I think that's just the way it works. So I'm really happy with that time on that course.
And so I mean, I know it's like the worst question to ask, but you're in recovery, thinking about when you're going to start running again soon. With those times in mind, like the World Championship standards are out for Tokyo, the World Championships coming up pretty soon. Is that something that you're eyeing, that new standard, which is really aggressive, or like what's coming up next? Where are your eyes looking to now?
Yeah, no, I'm not going for that standard. I'm going to be
okay.
Like, I know I'm not going for it. Not that I don't think I could, because I think, you put me on Seville again and give me a really good build. I think that I have a chance at a time like that, but I just don't think that's what I want to do right now. Based on my performance in New York, my performance in Seville last year, and my performance in Houston last year, which all count towards world ranking. I have a really good resume built up that if Tokyo World Champs is something I want to do, I think it's probably on the table for me. World Champs are a little different than the Olympics in that way. Like, generally speaking, you don't need the standard to go. I didn't have the standard in Eugene or Budapest, and I made both those teams. So I have a good little case built up for myself. So if that's something I want to do, still on the table. But I think my next race will be, something like New York, that is a championship style race against some of the best runners in the world, where I'll just try to do the same thing again and hopefully do it a little bit better. And that'll be probably my next focus, and maybe some shorter, faster races between now and then, because I think that it's always good to work on your high end in between marathons in order to continue to improve upon your marathon.
I mean, Houston's right around the corner. You can always hop in the half there.
Yeah, I think I need a little bit more time. I think I'm thinking something a little later than that. I would love to. Houston's like seriously one of my favorite races. I've run it 3 times. Every time I've run it, I've run a personal best and had a very, very positive experience. So Houston will be a race I will be back at in the future. But funny enough, I've only ever run Houston on like alternating years. Like, I've never done it 2 years in a row. So I kind of feel like, it's funny enough, I have to kind of like maybe I have to wait till 2026 to do it. I did it in 2020, 2022, 2024. So maybe I'll just do it in 2026. I'll keep the biannual tradition going.
All right. Sounds good. I mean, it's been working for you so far.
Yeah.
I know we've gone a little bit longer than we had planned, but I got one last thing I want to talk to you about that I think could be kind of fun.
No problem. Talking to you.
All right, great. I put together a little list of what I think are the fastest running YouTubers. And I mean, I know YouTube's not your main profession, but for the purpose of this list, I'll put you in here. Where do you think you fall on the list of fastest running YouTubers?
Probably top 5. I maybe top 10. I honestly, I'm not as big of a consumer as I am a producer of YouTube content. But the only person that comes immediately to my mind, if we're just talking marathons, is Clayton.
Okay. So on my list, and I put this together, I spent a whole 5 minutes on this. So my list, I have you coming in at number 3 of the fastest running YouTubers. Clayton is right ahead of you at number 2. And at number 1, this might be a little controversial, but I'm going to put Suguru Osaku at number 1. He's got like 80 something thousand subscribers. He's still making videos, and he has a 205 PB. So I feel like, I don't know if he can run a 205 now, but I mean, for a retired guy who just, also did really well in the Olympics, I mean, I feel like he still kind of counts.
I didn't even know Suguru had a YouTube, to be honest, but I am now going to go subscribe and watch all of them because Suguru is my favorite marathoner. I'm not even kidding. Number 1 all-time favorite marathoner.
I love watching him race. Heads up, though, the channel is in all Japanese. I don't speak a word of Japanese, but it's still pretty fun to watch.
Nihongo ga skoshi hanashimasu.
Okay. You know a lot more Japanese than I do.
I just said I speak a little bit of Japanese.
All right. And then just so you know, to round it out, I went to 4 spaces. The person who's right behind you would be Steven Scullion. So you got him beat by
that. That's a fierce 4. I've got the least amount of subscribers though, so I've got a lot of work to do.
All right, but I feel like that's a pretty good list, and I feel like you got a good ranking on there.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that research.
Hard-hitting journalism from you over here.
Yeah, always.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and congratulations again on New York. We can't wait to see what you've got in store with your new coach. And for 2025, we're rooting for you over here, and we can't wait to hear what your next race is.
Okay, sounds great. I look forward to announcing it.